I was struck by many of the presentations yesterday about so many things that are happening amongst our customers and our partners. But in the midst of that, I was handed this document by Mark, and he asked me to read these Zebra RFID facts for you. So please hold your applause and any laughter that you might have until at least I get through them, okay? So these are the Zebra RFID facts. Zebra is a perfect partner. No room to improve. So that's the first fact. Second fact is we have a complete hardware and software stack to meet all of our industry needs. That's the second fact. Third, we know 98% of all RFID use cases across all segments. So we clearly understand it, and there's not much room for us to improve there. And then lastly, we know more about RFID than all the combined knowledge of everybody in this room. So thank you, Mark, for those facts. That really helped me position for this morning. So I'm going to chat with you a little bit about our RFID strategy and solutions from a Zebra perspective, and maybe you're wondering what ALT is. That's the business unit that I'm responsible for inside of Zebra, and ALT is Advanced Location Technology. And that's really a combination of all of our locationing solutions, which includes passive RFID, but other active technologies that we do as well. And I will tell you, and I won't be emphasizing that today because primarily we are not emphasizing most of our active activities and products in the business unit today because the demand is not there for that the same way that we have seen with passive. There are some exceptions. We do a lot with American football. You probably see some of the spreads that go out there around next-gen stats brought to you by Amazon. Well, it's actually brought to you from Zebra. That's what we do. We do player tracking for the NFL and all product, and it's all real-time locationing. So a very successful part of our business. However, the transition to passive or the movement from most use cases to solve complex problems has really happened in the passive world. And I'll chat a little bit more about those. And I think James covered on this a little bit yesterday. I want to touch on it again today about sort of the differentiation of where we see Zebra holding some uniqueness here. Because we refer to this as our near field to fixed capability, meaning near field in terms of some of the products that we have where we're building in near field RFID into those products, up to 6 feet. Then you get into that mid-range use case set of products, and then on up into the autonomous world of fixed reading. And there's really nobody in the marketplace that's delivering that sort of breadth of capability. But again, sorry to debunk the myths of our facts. We don't have everything in that portfolio, but we like the fact that we're moving in a direction that really helps our customers and our partners implement around this sort of thinking and theology, because having short range is really solving a new set of use cases that we didn't see coming even as early as 2 years ago. And we've been doing a lot in that mid-range for quite some time because it feels like anything in the handheld has been the early place for adoption and implementation. And there's been a lot of piloting and a lot of discussion going on around that autonomous sensing fixed reading area, and we're seeing more happen in that space, and we're going to see more. So let's talk a little bit more about where we're going. So holistically, we have a set of capabilities around fixed reading, portals, antennas, and software to drive that, and then there are these handheld offerings that we bring to market as well to help solve different sets of use cases. And then we're really strong in the print labels and supplies space too. And those platforms really help us drive some differentiation because one thing is for sure, when we think about our alignment and work that we do with companies like Avery, they are very strong in the source tagging part of the business. We are not in that. However, you want to define what source tagging is in some cases, because one thing we're finding is source tagging is moving to some on-prem scenarios, in which case you have to print at at a premise or on location, and we actually do participate there, and we really can help. So there's some things that we want to do across that portfolio to, again, expand the horizons of what our customers are asking for in that space. Always proud to show the sort of portfolio slide, covering everything that we have, but I'm always amazed at how incomplete it is when I hear from so many of you about what you're trying to accomplish. And just having breakfast this morning with Harold, and he was explaining to me at Bosch, where we've fallen short on some things that they've had to go build and augment against it. So we clearly have room to expand the kinds of things that we're doing in the portfolio. But maybe what you heard yesterday when James presented from the enterprise mobility team, the depth and breadth of how we're really implementing RFID across the Zebra chasm of platforms. And I think that's a really important point for us, because we come from a legacy and heritage of barcode and print. So UPC has been the dominant form of identification over the years, and we've played a significant role. Zebra has, certainly with the acquisitions that have been there over the years with Symbol and so forth. So barcode is in our DNA. And as we transition and we start thinking about where RFID will play a more significant role, we want to be way out in front of that. And we think we can help our customers as we do it. So when you look at this portfolio, again, we will continue to build this out, from near field based products right on through to the high end overhead type systems. And then I think somewhere in between, I'm going to touch on this, there are capabilities that we want to enable around specific use cases and control points. When you look at the handheld portfolio, we really marry a broad range of our mobile computing platforms to our mid-range handheld solutions as well. So you really can mix and match and do a whole bunch of things with what we offer in that space. And that's really key, because different companies use different mobile computings for different parts of their business and solving different aspects and different use cases. So we want to make sure that we can support that. And that portfolio, we believe, leads the industry very much. Okay, let's chat a little bit about different reading types that we serve. And I think this is actually a really important part of where we think about things from a strategy perspective. Lay out for you these three reading types. There's presence reading. Presence reading is really about counting my stuff or identifying, what it is. And we see people use standard products for that. That is the standard place where most people are implementing RFID today. And understanding how to do that, whether it's in the form of a handheld device or a fixed reader, this is the typical way that things get started. As we move from that and people move up the use case ladder, we get into what we refer to as control point reads. And control point reads are really important because these are places where you need a specific read for a specific function. And in often cases, what we're finding is at a control point, those are unique hardware requirements wrapped around it. To give you an example, in a retail environment, it could be point of sale. Point of sale is a read point. That's a control point. The exit of a store is a control point. The receiving area is a control point. When we think about manufacturing, a dock door is a control point. There are so many different control points that are emerging in the area of what's happening to my stuff. So we move from counting it to what's happening, and the information that flows along that line from counting to what's happening to my stuff becomes a really important differentiator, because now you begin to see things through a different lens. And if I take retail as an example just for a moment, and we say at the exit, I need to know if that item left my store, if it was actually paid for. How do I do that, right? I need to know at the point of sale when I'm scanning through that item, doing a price lookup, I also want to get a read there because I need to identify whether or not that item was paid for. On the exit, I need to be able to read it and be able to validate that. Because if that item happens to return to the store, I might want to identify it and say that product was not paid for on its outbound journey. And so these control points become highly valuable in terms of running the operation. Let's not be mistaken. Whether or not that item was paid for or not in a retail environment, I still need to replenish it. And if you have that information, you can replenish it. But if you don't see that item leaving the store having never been paid for, then you're going to be out of whack in your inventory position. And thus, it becomes really important to get an exit read. Because if you don't have a product, it's going to be really difficult to fulfill an order, whether it's somebody coming into the store or somebody having ordered something online. So control points become really, really important. And as we move up into automated sensing, you answer the question, where is my stuff? Locating things becomes a really important aspect of trying to find a product that's in your environment. And again, this doesn't have to be just retail. This can be in a manufacturing, it can be in a transportation use case as well. But knowing where something is becomes the next really powerful or emerging part of a journey for anybody looking at RFID. So that part is more sophisticated, and whether or not we're talking about real-time locationing or whether we're using XYZ triangulation around an item or a tag, these are areas where we invest a lot of our energy, and we have for a lot of years. We've been in this space, and we do it pretty well. But what isn't clear yet is how many people really want to move that far and how fast they want to get there. Over time, it's obvious that the more information that you have, we can be much more responsive to the customers that are out there. So the automated sensing space becomes a whole new horizon and frontier. And certainly we're seeing some of the early adoption with customers who are starting to look at autonomous sensing, locationing as well, to really know where their stuff is. So these three reading types become important aspects of how we think about our own portfolio and how we help you, our customers and partners, really drive for differentiation. Again, presence type reading is pretty basic. It's your starting point. This is where most of the adoption has gone on today, and control points are starting pretty significantly across multiple industries, and we're seeing the early adoption of automated sensing happening here over time. So those three are key elements of how we think about our portfolio. Now, let's talk a little bit about an example of how we look at an industry or a segment, and each segment's going to be different. We could have modern warehouse, we could have the modern factory, and in this case, we think about modern retail. And in a retail setting, we really do think about the consumer, we think about the product, and we think about the associates that work in that environment. And those are really key to differentiate, our capabilities across the Zebra portfolio into a modern store architecture. Well, again, if we're thinking about legacy technology of barcode, we can still leverage very extensive efforts and systems that are built around that. But as we think about modernizing and automation, RFID is going to play a really important role in helping a consumer know more about what they are trying to buy. It's really informing the retailer more about what products they have and where those products are. And it's also about helping associates really serve their customer and do their job more highly effectively. That is the triangulation around those three aspects of modernization and automation. This is where RFID plays a really important role in helping our customers advance. So I heard some of these things yesterday when we were hearing from some of the presentations. Marco was mentioning this from Boji as well, and I thought that some of the things that he shared, really resonated with how we were, thinking about this. Staffing is a problem. I mean, whether or not it's a retail environment or whether it's manufacturing or transportation or other healthcare, like managing and maintaining, your staff is becoming difficult. Recruiting, retaining, and how do we basically empower and enable those people? those frontline workers really are the ones that we're focused on trying to help do their job better. But probably as important is, how do we retain them? How do you create an environment where they want to stay? Because the differentiation of the technology that this company offers fulfills the things that I want to do, in terms of working with consumers. And I think that's really important. These are things that we're hearing from many of our customers today. And then, of course, there's the whole idea about, taking out the complexity that runs in the environment. How many people grew up working in a retail environment, while they were going to school or early on? Not many. I'm a little surprised. Okay, I thought there'd be a lot more. I mean, for a lot of people, that's a great place to start, right? You get a job working in some type of environment, and you don't really understand how that operation works. You just know you're asked to do this function. So I think there's a lot of complexity in there, because when you start asking questions when you're young and you don't understand, that opens up a whole new realm of challenges that you don't get and you don't understand about how that retail operation works. So we want to demystify that, and we want to think about how we can bring down the complexity, and that really helps, the associate. I thought that statistic was pretty important. 85% of leading omni-channel retailers agree that buy on return in store is the problem. No longer is it a problem to buy online and pick up in store. I think we've solved that problem pretty easily. But returning an item to the store, wow, they don't know how to do that today, because they've got different channels associated with it, and they're really struggling through it. But some are making advancements. And then I think lastly, the shopper experience. When we look at helping our consumers really get to what they want, and there's more demands about the products that they're purchasing. Whether or not it's a garment or whether it's a food product, they want to understand a little bit more about origination, and they want to figure out, how do I gather more information about that? So when we think about what's coming to the power of even our mobile phone, how quickly are we going to be able to get there and use our devices to be able to track and trace our own products? And the digital passport work that's happening here in Europe is certainly something where we see we're headed in this direction. So shoppers are raising the game. They're forcing everybody to say, I need more information about the products that I'm looking at. These all create the modern store sort of framework to how we look at it. We want to make sure that you understood we're doing the same thing across the different segments that we serve. So modern store was one, and you'll see more information coming from us in the future around the modern factory and modern warehouse and modern distribution. Okay, so I wanted to give some examples about these control points that I talked about earlier, and just really highlight them again as to areas where we see in the retail setting people implementing unique places to get reads. So again, often cases, the first order use case is to take a handheld and do a cycle count and understand, what I have in that environment. But when we think holistically about other control points, people need to be able to identify and track those products throughout the receiving side of product coming into the store, transition when the product moves from the back to front. That's an important control point. We talked a little bit about exits and point of sale, but I think there's another one that's emerging too, and that's around employees who are exiting those facilities. One customer in the US more recently, we discovered when we were doing some work with them that, believe it or not, employees were actually taking bags of new merchandise and they were jamming them in the trash chute so that they could, after work, go to that trash bin and recover the merchandise that they would take and sell on the open market. Like, nobody saw that. Nobody could see that a trash bin chute might be a control point to know what products are going in there that we got to read. We could, if they had a reader at that control point, they could see what products were going out. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, that whole area of organized crime is creating so much challenge for everybody to deal with, and having information really helps, combat organized crime units around the globe in this space. And then I think about fitting rooms. Fitting rooms becomes, a highly profitable area in a retail setting. when a person goes in to try on something in a fitting room, their percentage of purchasing that product goes way up. It's well above 75%. But the fitting room is also a high area of theft and high area of loss because bad actors like to take product into the fitting room and pull them on, pull a garment on underneath and cover it up. And they have figured out how to remove tags and so forth so that they're not detected on exit. So a fitting room becomes a really important point to know what went in the fitting room. And then we can see if something didn't come back out. So those are just a couple of examples that I wanted to share with that. And then I think about, the warehouse that's also becoming a special place for opportunities to implement control points too. And we see this throughout the operation of that warehouse because product are moving all around, whether it's on the inbound or whether it's on the outbound of those reads. There's also things that are happening inside that facility to really create more points of clarification or information gathering. And this is where we think some of our products are also serving our customers very well. Okay, lastly, we talked a little bit about ubiquitous read or automated sensing. And again, this type of implementation becomes much more expensive. It's not the kind of environment that you would implement ubiquitous reading across a holistic area unless you had full coverage of your tagging on most of your products. But when you do, and when you do take advantage of full coverage, you really can create a much more streamlined flow of data and information to help you respond to those types of use cases. So, you realistically see and understand what's happening when a product is moving from this zone to that zone. It helps you understand where to find it. One great example that we saw is how orders are being picked effectively using mobile computing in the hands of pickers to be able to go identify where that product is in the store very quickly and fulfill those orders. We've seen improvements of well over 80% on the pick rates and speed to which online orders can be fulfilled. So, the ubiquitous read environment is really the future of where we're going to see most things happen in a variety of different environments. Okay, last item, there wasn't a lot of talk about AI, and let's face it, AI is probably the most overused, emphasized dialogue point today. If any of you were at the National Retail Federation, or you were at ProMat, or you were at Automate, everybody's talking about AI. And I think it brings a lot of promise to the things that we're looking at. But I think there's also some important aspects of how we're looking at AI to help our business. I mean, holistically inside Zebra, we're using AI to really improve how we are building products. We're using it to test and validate our products. And yeah, we're using it to think about how to go faster from a development standpoint as well. But I want to take a slightly different approach to it, is to really think about the data pool that RFID creates significantly. It's a bigger pool of data and information than we've ever had before. And deciphering information that's flowing out of your presence reads, your control points, or your automated sensing systems and environment, you've got so much more data. How do you take that and make really good sense of it? And I think, EPC, electronic product code data, is really now going to offer what UPC could never do before. We couldn't see it that quickly. It always had to be processed at the end of the day. Now we're getting real-time information, and we can actually take that information and apply AI to really understand that more holistically. So EPC is a real change from how we are going to be able to leverage AI holistically. Source data is driving real-time actions and creating value to both the enterprise and the consumer. So we talked about this a little bit before. If source data is available, I as a consumer, I want to know. I want to understand how that data is going to affect the products that I'm buying. Not everybody cares about where a product is grown or where it's manufactured, how it's built, what materials it's made of. Not everybody cares about that, but more and more people are. And if you have that source data and information and you can publish that information to help your consumers do it, they are going to grab a hold of it. And they're going to buy from you because that's a differentiated experience. I think AI will also separate the mundane from the unique. And what I mean by that is, the mundane is really about watching the information that we have flow into core systems that is really not accessible. And I can now, with AI, I can look at a data stream in a different line to be able to decipher something new and something different, to say, hey, did you guys know that that store or that warehouse or that transportation vehicle is producing at a much higher rate? And when we look at it in more detail, we could see these products moving that much quicker, or we could see these individuals doing these tasks so much more efficiently. There's uniqueness there that EPC is going to provide for us that you just would never get to in a non-RFID world. So uniqueness around the utilization of AI becomes important. Okay, the mark of success for implementation of any use case is going to be speed and accuracy. That is something that AI can help us with. We can now really, if you've got all of this information, we can really look at it and we can leverage that data to really go faster and to be more accurate. And usually in those environments, that translates into profitability, and profitability is what everybody's out there looking for. Consumers will benefit more, and we're seeing it today, but I think in the future, there's going to be so much more demand because consumers are going to have the power of AI in their own hands, and they're doing it today. How we enable that, I think, is a new frontier for us that I don't think we even fully understand that. But the power of what we carry on our hips and how we're going to be able to access that information in any of the environments becomes really important. And use a transportation example. I want to know if I've got a package coming to me, I want to be able to know when it's being delivered, and I might want to be able to schedule that. That was talked about yesterday as well. How do I use the power of the engine in my hand to be able to go do that? So the consumer experience is really going to drive more requirement and need through that. And I think lastly, the areas of impact for AI, it's multifaceted. And we've touched on these already to some degree, that the inventory, and I don't want to talk about the products that they typically sell because we've already been talking about that. What about non-sellable assets inside an enterprise? Locating assets that you have that really help you drive your business. And how many times does somebody say, I can't believe how many times we've heard this. We can't find the forklift in a warehouse. Where is it? Where is that handheld device that we use to do that function? We can't find it. Or is it gone missing? Is it damaged or misplaced? So there are so many assets that most enterprises have, and being able to locate them and make sure that they're in use all times is really an important part of what they're doing. And again, we touched on associates already. I want to come back to that one. Customers, we spent quite a bit of time on. The associates, I think, stand to benefit in a huge way in this space, and how an associate will become much more powerful and effective in leading, using that information to drive better outcomes. And I think lastly, around infrastructure and IT and beyond, how AI is going to help us really go that much faster around implementation. And what's behind that is making sure that we've got really solid data coming from EPC as well. So much here that we could talk about, but I think it's important to note that it's all built on the foundation of having data in order to do it. And now we've got tons of data coming out of EPC, which is great. Okay, I guess just lastly, I just wanted to touch on, working with Zebra and our partners. We need to hear from you. We need to understand where we're deficient. And many of you have shared already some areas of opportunity for us to work together more effectively. And I appreciate that feedback. And again, to debunk one of the myths before, we don't have everything, and we've got areas where we can improve, and the more communication we have in that really will help us. So I look forward to more conversations around that, because we definitely want to scale faster to help you implement more effectively and quicker with your customers as well. So I think that wraps what I wanted to share with you this morning, and I'm looking forward to some more dialogue. I want to say again, thank you for coming to this important event for us. It's really a great place for us to meet you, and I think as we think about new ways of engaging in events like this with our European teams going forward, we really value you and all that you do to work with us as a company. So much appreciated. At this point, I'm going to, sorry, jumped ahead there. I'm going to introduce Rolf to come. He's coming up from NXP, and he's going to give you a discussion around their platforms and products too. So Rolf, come on up.